Hello everybody and welcome to this Biggerplate webinar. My name is Liam Hughes. I am the founder of Biggerplate.com and it is my pleasure to be presenting to you today a very brief but hopefully enlightening introduction to MindMeister. I can see a few people on the line already, so that's great. Thank you for joining me. It's always interesting for me to know where people are joining from today, so if you want to use the questions panel and just let me know where you're coming from and that you can hear me okay and see the screen okay, that's always very helpful for me. And also, if you have any questions, particularly around MindMeister, may as well get them in nice and early, and I'll try and wrap them up during the session. So I'm going to present to you today just using a MindMeister map, as you might expect. So I'm going to jump straight in here in the interest of time and come around here into the welcome section of our map. So you're looking at a MindMeister map right now, and I'm going to give you a very brief introduction, and then we're going to start to look at what can you actually do with MindMeister and how do you do it. So as I said earlier, my name is Liam. I'm the founder of Biggerplate. Biggerplate, for those of you who don't know, was set up in 2008. So we've been around quite a long time. I had the idea for Biggerplate in 2006, which is when I was at university. And since then, we've gradually grown into what we like to call, and luckily other people call us this, which is the home of mind mapping. Now, specifically, that focuses on three key areas. As we say, it's templates, tutorials, and training. So the templates piece is really about our mind map library, where you can find thousands of mind map templates and examples that have been created and shared by people all over the world who are using mind mapping software, including MindMeister. We've also got a wide range of tutorials on the website that can help you to learn how to make sort of best use out of your software, and MindMeister tutorials again on Biggerplate to help you understand how to make more out of this program. And of course, for organizations and even for sort of small, big businesses, large businesses, governments, education, we also provide training in both virtual and in-house training services to help people understand how they can use mind mapping tools and techniques. Membership at Biggerplate, for those of you who may not know, it comes in two types. The first is our free membership. That is a basic level membership, and that enables you to download and open mind maps as well as share your own mind maps on the Biggerplate library. We've got a community of over 180,000, I think, at the last count, members on Biggerplate. So you're working a part of a very much a global community of our members from all over the world who are sharing mind maps, downloading mind maps, and really showing how these tools can be used. Our paid membership is called Biggerplate Pro. That costs $29 per year, and that's going to give you access to a lot more sort of resources on Biggerplate, and it's resources for beginners, intermediate, and advanced users. It doesn't mean you have to be a pro user of mind mapping software. It's about accessing webinars. We've got a huge range of live and on-demand webinars running all the time to help you see how other practitioners and users around the world are using mind mapping. And again, we've got more tutorials. There are special offers for pro members, an image library to help you brighten up your mind maps, and some extra sharing functionality in there as well. So that's Biggerplate, and that's our setup. You can, of course, just go to biggerplate.com and you'll be able to learn lots about us without having to listen to me talk. So this webinar, what are we going to be looking at here? This is focused on a really simple introduction to MindMeister. Probably those of you on the call today are very unfamiliar with MindMeister. Maybe you've just started experimenting with it, but we're going to be covering some real basic stuff here. We're going to look at some of the benefits and sort of core strengths of MindMeister. I'm going to just show you some of the sort of basic functionality, and then we're going to look at some example mind maps just to get a sense of how other people are using these tools. What we're not going to be covering in this session, just to be clear for people, is I'm not going to be talking about pricing or sales information for MindMeister. We at Biggerplate, we don't make or sell software, so if you want to talk about pricing and maybe buying software for your company, you need to talk to MindMeister rather than us. So I'm not going to be talking about pricing and sales. I'm also not going to be talking about accounts and files and folders and how you set up your MindMeister accounts. And I'm also not going to be talking about Meister Task, which is the sister product of MindMeister. It's a great tool. We use it and we really like it, but that's maybe a different topic and not really specific to mind mapping. So that's what I'm not going to be covering today. In terms of you who have joined me today, I would love to get your questions. I would love to get your feedback, your comments, and your experiences. So I'd suggest you use ask that you use the questions panel, which is in GoToWebinar. You should be able to access this down the right-hand side of your screen. And you can pop in your questions, but it doesn't have to be a question. If you just have a comment or your own experience in terms of using MindMeister or any mind mapping tool, really, I'm very interested to to hear that, and you can just pop your questions in the questions panel. It won't disrupt me, and then I can read those at any point in the session and then hopefully answer the questions. So just to test out that panel, it'd be really useful to know what is your interest in MindMeister today. So if you want to just help me test out that that question panel is working okay and that you're hearing me all right, that would be really handy to just understand what is your interest in MindMeister and or mind mapping, or maybe even what is your interest in Biggerplate. So if you want to use that questions panel and just drop in your questions, that would be very handy for me just to get us up and running. So without any further ado, what I'm going to do is move down here and let's start looking at MindMeister itself. So as I said earlier, you're looking at a MindMeister map, and I'm just going to give you an overview really of MindMeister, look at some of the functions. So the strengths of MindMeister are really sort of threefold in our opinion, the sort of top three strengths. The first is the real-time collaboration aspect of MindMeister. Now this is something I can't really demonstrate here and now, but the key thing with MindMeister compared to other mind mapping tools is it is an online tool. So as long as you've got an internet connection, you can be using MindMeister, and that's regardless of whether you're on one laptop or you have one laptop at home, one computer at work, and you just need to log in. It's like accessing Facebook wherever you are. If you've got a login, you can get into using MindMeister. So it's online access, means you can access anywhere. But importantly, what this also means is you can actually work online with others at the same time in the same map. So a lot of people are using Google Docs and things like that to work on documents at the same time with other people. MindMeister will enable you to do that only using mind maps. So in theory, somebody else could be in this mind map with me at exactly the same time, and they could be adding parts to the map. We could be talking on Skype or something, and we could all be working together on the same map. This is what we do quite often at Biggerplate. Biggerplate is a remote-first company. That means all of our people are spread out and not in the same place very often. So it works very, very well for remote teams to be able to put on a headset, all be looking at the same map, and have multiple people updating their sections of a project, all using MindMeister. So very, very strong real-time collaboration. There are other tools that provide real-time collaboration, but we would probably tell you that MindMeister is the strongest, and it's kind of been their forte for over a decade. So it's really where they started, and that's where they continue to be very, very strong. So another sort of real strength of MindMeister, and it may be slightly underselling it really, but MindMeister is extremely simple and easy to use. It is very easy for people to start using it. You can get a free basic account on MindMeister that gives you, I think, 3 maps you can create. It's a really good way of dipping your toe in the water. So if you haven't tried MindMeister or you haven't tried mind mapping, it's a really nice place to start. It's also very easy to share your mind maps. I could come down here in this one, for example, and I can just share this in various ways. I can invite people to the map, I can share it on social media, and of course I can share it on Biggerplate. So it means it's really easy to engage other people in your mind maps if you do want to do that real-time collaboration and work with other people in the same map. As I'll hopefully demonstrate for you today during this session, it's also a very simple interface in MindMeister. And what I mean by that is you're not going to get overwhelmed with lots of menu options and buttons and trying to figure out what you do what with. So generally, most of what we're going to want to do in MindMeister, we can access through this really simple little menu here, which pops open lots of different options, but again, nothing particularly overwhelming. And as soon as you get familiar with this little menu, you're up and running in many different ways. So simplicity and ease of use is a pretty big win from key function MindMeister. The other thing that's very strong in MindMeister, which is related to the online functions of it, is MindMeister will work across any device. So we know that lots of people are, for example, Windows at work and Mac at home, or vice versa. And we know that lots of people like to use their iPads and things like that. The key thing with MindMeister is as long as you've got a browser, you can be using the tool. It's also worth noting that there are specific native apps for Apple iOS, so iPads and things like that, as well as Android. So no matter what device you're using, you can access and work with your MindMeister maps. And that is actually surprisingly rare in the world of mind mapping software. It's not actually that common at the minute to be able to work in one program across all of these different devices. So it's a real strength of MindMeister if you are using multiple kinds of device, that you'll be able to access and work with your maps across all of them. So just before I jump into the basics, I'm just going to do a quick check on my questions. Great. Okay, so a couple of people here saying, Susan, hi Susan, trying to learn how to use mind mapping in personal professional life and with clients. Yeah, that's great. Somebody else here says, just signed up for MindMeister for my company, trying to understand what we can do with it. Yep, absolutely brilliant. So I'm hoping I can just show you some really simple uses today, but as always, if anybody wants to know a little bit more or you need a bit of help getting used to it, as I say, we do a lot of one-on-one coaching with people around mapping, as well as consulting and training with companies. So feel free to drop me a line if any of this looks useful. But for now, let's just take a quick look in at our basic MindMeister functionality and see how that's going to work. So in terms of map building, we're going to really rely, or I tend to rely, just on a couple of things. So first and foremost, adding topics in MindMeister is a simple case of just using the keyboard. You can use little option up here to add topics, but to have to keep going up there and clicking with the mouse is pretty inefficient. So what I would suggest you use is just the insert or tab key, and that adds a subtopic like that. And then you also have the enter or return key, that should probably say there, depending on what your keyboard says. Enter return key will sort of go down. So if you think of that as insert and tab goes out, and then if I hit enter, I go down. And what that means is you can quickly start to build out a little kind of hierarchy, and you can think of it almost like a sideways family tree. You've got some parents, some children, and some grandchildren out and out. But all I'm doing to build that is just insert and return to build out that basic structure of my mind map. And obviously in this context, that doesn't really make much sense to just be writing out gibberish, but to just quickly build out the content of your mind map using insert and return, rather than jumping up here to this box or this option every time you want to add something. Very, very quick and easy to do. So once you've added some topics in MindMeister, it's then really important to think about whether you want to move or reorder things, because a huge part of the power of mind mapping is helping you to structure unstructured information and ideas sometimes. It's why it's such a great brainstorming tool, or if you're working with clients, to collect their perspectives and put it together in a mind map, but then start to say, actually, I think this belongs down here, and maybe this belongs with this, or we might select both of those and move them back up to where they were. Now again, in isolation like this, that seems very trivial, but it's really the heart of the power of mind mapping software. And to move topics in MindMeister, all we're doing is I'm just clicking with my left mouse button, holding it down, and you see as I move it then around the map, MindMeister shows me with this sort of dark gray indicator where that's going to land. So I can move it to there, or I can grab it again with the left mouse and drag, put it there, or of course I can put it back where it began, which was up here. Oh, nearly back there. If I wanted to grab more than one, I can either do a control and drag across, and you see there I've now grabbed two topics, and left click, drag them down, they'll move together. Or I can undo that, and potentially you can also move branches higher up. They don't have to be right on the ends here. You might say, actually, I want to move this entire thing up to there, and I want to move this entire thing up to there. And again, similarly, we can then move them both back if we so choose. So hopefully that's not too disorienting as I'm moving things around, but the key thing is moving information around your mind map is very, very useful as a general principle in using mind mapping tools, and MindMeister is going to make it nice and simple for you to do that. You build out the core structure of your map using insert return, and to quickly move things around, get things where you want them, is going to be very, very useful. You can also then use these little clickers here to show and hide information, and it's a good principle in mind mapping generally to hide the information that you're not working with right now. What we really are trying to do when we're using mind mapping tools is get away from being sort of overwhelmed with too much text and too much in front of us. So it's always a good idea just to hit these little buttons to show and hide information when we're not working in that area. And that's going to just mean the information in front of us is a little bit more manageable, and we're not maybe dealing with so much distraction. In terms of navigation in MindMeister, we've got a couple of different options here to use, again, depending on what your preference is. What I tend to use a lot, as you'll probably see as I work through this, is I quite often just use this left click on the back of the screen here. So in the sort of the blank space, the background of the mind map, if I click left mouse and hold down and then move with the pad around, I can sort of pull the canvas around. Now I use that a huge amount, as you'll see during this presentation, just to quickly move my way around the map in sort of little jumps and bursts, or in much bigger bursts. If I wanted to pull right across, I can do that. So I use the map grab a huge amount to just find my way around a map. And then again, you might want to use zooming functions, which are over here on the left-hand side, to either zoom in or zoom out. Although I think, as I said, I did them the wrong way around. But the key thing with zooming in a mind map is mind maps are pretty much the only tool that enables you to see both the sort of detailed view, so we're pretty zoomed in right now, but if I want to, I can zoom out nice and easily and get that sort of macro picture, the bigger picture, really simply. And there aren't many tools or techniques for working that enable you to have the detailed view and the big picture in the same document, in the same way of working. So it's a real strength of mind mapping software, and a real strength of MindMeister, enabling you to just quickly zoom in on the areas you want to focus, but then always be able to zoom your way back out and figure out where you are in the overall scheme of things. So that's navigation in a MindMeister map building and adding topics. Hopefully nothing too confusing there, and I'm sure lots of you have already started to experiment with those functions based on what you've said in the questions panel. So a good thing we want to be trying to do in our mind maps, because mind maps are a way of visually working, we might want to actually start to then use some of the additional functionality in MindMeister to add a little bit more of that visual interest into our maps, either to make certain information stand out or to give ourselves little reminders, visual cues, visual signposts, whatever it might be, that just helps us to manage our ideas and our information just that little bit better. So as an example, one of the things we can do just so you can sort of personalize the content to yourself is use lots of different formatting options. So to do that, we're going to come up to this menu that I showed you earlier, and I'm just going to pop that open, this sidebar menu. And you'll see I've got a lot of different options in here. And if we're talking about formatting a particular topic, so let's say we've got our idea is in here, and we maybe want to do something with that, what we can do is we can select from a sort of pre-made formatted set of different styles of box here that MindMeister has provided for us, or we can go into a little bit more effort and start to customize the text and the background ourselves using these different functions. But you'll see all of this is contained in a very manageable little menu here. You're not having to open lots of different sections of the MindMeister tool in order to be able to make these changes. And you'll start to get a feel for which style of map you like to look at the most. If you want to just make a change that goes across the whole map, you can actually come up here to this little information icon, and you'll see down here we've actually got a whole set of sort of ready-made themes in MindMeister that if I select one, I can just say override, I think, and that's going to change everything to this new style. So you've got some ready-made themes. If you don't want to spend too much time messing around with formatting, I'm just going to undo that, because otherwise I'm left with a slightly green map. But you can see there how you can just use the map theme to adapt it and sort of change, and you can customize little pieces of it, including the color of your lines, the color of your boxes, the color of your text, etc., etc. So if you are perhaps running a business where you want to have your documentation all sort of looking and feeling the same, for example, most Biggerplate mind maps sort of have this kind of blue style which matches our logo and our sort of identity. So again, for a business user to play around a little bit with the formatting of your MindMeister maps in order to kind of create your brand template is a really good thing to do. And once you've got that, you can save it as a theme and reuse it nice and easily. So other things we might want to do, again, using this side menu, is start to use some of the images and icons that MindMeister provides. Now, in terms of images, if I just remove that for a second, the way we can add an image in is, again, just looking through this little menu here, click this middle one that says images. And I can say to add an image, and you'll see I've got some options here. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, I'm sure it's probably quite small if I zoom in a bit for you there. So I can say to browse the image library, and that's going to pop open the MindMeister library of images, sort of clip art that you can insert into your maps at any given time. So I can say use that, select that, and I can even resize the image in the topic, you see, just by grabbing that bottom right corner. Now it's important to say I can also add images from my computer. So perhaps I've, as I have here, I've uploaded a logo and a little image here. So you can add images from your own computer. Maybe you've got your own logos and identities that you want to insert into the map nice and easily. And that's just your sort of standard JPEGs or PNG files, and they'll all work fine. The second type of image we can use is actually an icon, and the important difference here with icons compared to images is you can think of images as being quite decorative. They're a way of making things look nice, whereas the icons are actually kind of searchable, usable items within the MindMeister map. And what I mean by that is we can post a new action. For example, let's say we're mapping out a project, we can add an action in here, and then I'm going to pop open this icons panel here, and what I might do is put on a few icons. I'm going to say, let's put on this one, and this icon is just going to enable me to click through and update how far complete that particular action is. So maybe the action is halfway through, but maybe there's something going a little bit wrong with that action. So I'm going to also use this little exclamation mark symbol to just make myself aware of that, and again, make it stand out a little bit more. Now, you can add these, you can change, and you'll see there's a huge range of icons available here in MindMeister. I tend to suggest you don't use too many different types. You don't want to sort of forget what your icons mean. So if you're using a sort of relatively regular set of icons, for example, we at Biggerplate quite often will use a red and a green flag. We use the task completion icons, and we use this exclamation mark to really signal that something is urgent or very sort of time sensitive, for example. Now, when I said these are usable, the important thing is here, in this entire mind map, if I zoom out, there's a lot of information in here, but what I can do using the icons is if I close all of this down and sort of hide everything, what I can do is actually come up here to the search in MindMeister and actually ask MindMeister to search for me based on the icons. So if you imagine I've inserted those red flags, or maybe that exclamation mark, the yellow caution sign, and I want to say to MindMeister, can you show me all of those yellow caution signs? If I hit that, what MindMeister is then doing is opening up the sections of my map, as you'll see there, where that symbol is being used. So this is where, as I say, if you zoom right out on the map, you'll see it's grayed out everything else, but it zoomed me right in and highlighted this area where I've marked that item. So if I'm using this to mark up items or tasks that are behind schedule or problematic, it's a way that I can very quickly zone in on the key areas. Now, to someone who said maybe they're working with clients, for example, what you might use in that context is, let's just remove that filter. If you're potentially working with clients using mind maps, we would suggest and kind of help. We've done this quite a few times with companies. We've helped them to build templates that sort of align with their existing processes. So they go into meetings with their template mind map that they're familiar with because it's their existing processes, and then they'll talk with the client about the problems and the ideas, and they'll keep mapping and taking their notes in the mind map. But importantly, what they might do with the client able to see that is maybe mark certain things with maybe the red flag or the green flag. And that's a way afterwards of saying to the client, I identify these items as the most important things. Do you agree with me? Is there anything else we should know about those? So using the icons and the visual cues in MindMeister to really help you highlight the things that matter is a very, very good use of this, this functionality. So I'm going to pause again in just 2 seconds, but in the meantime, I'm just going to show you two other things that might help us with some of that more visual working. So the first thing we can do is insert little relationship lines into our mind maps. Now, the way we do that is up here in this menu here. You see this little add a relationship here. If I click that, what it's going to do is pull this green line from here to wherever I land it. So if I click there, that's going to formulate that. And I can always just tweak this if I want it to look or feel a bit different. I can change the color, maybe to a red or something like that. Now, the way to use this is selectively. If you have too many of these lines, if I start adding these all over the place, that's actually going to start to create what we sort of call visual clutter. It's not necessarily helping you. It's going to start to hinder you after a while if you've got too many of these lines. So use those carefully. I'm just going to delete that one. But what this can be used to do is really highlight things that are important, but maybe in different areas of your mind map. So a good default position is to assume everything is connected somehow, because if it wasn't, it wouldn't be on the mind map. You can kind of think of this, everything branches off from this central topic. So everything is connected somehow. So you don't necessarily need to show all the time these relationships. But every now and then there is maybe a very strong correlation between two things, and you really want to make that stand out visually. That's where this relationship line can really kind of come in handy. And again, we can even add a label that says explains why that's particularly important. So again, you might have something in your project map that says beware of these two connected items. So that's relationship lines, again, used with caution and care. Boundaries we've actually inserted up here on the formatting topic. So if we just pop open our menu over here again and just come back one step to here, what we've got is a boundary. So let's just remove that and see how we add that again. So boundaries are good for sort of visually making a selection, a group of things stand out a little bit more. So for example, if I wanted to put a boundary around all of these ideas, what I can do is just come over here, and press select. And again, I've got different options and different styles within MindMeister, and I've got the option if I want to then do some customization. So this is a nice sort of function. Again, I wouldn't advise having too many of these, otherwise they sort of lose their impact. But if you maybe in your map have a couple of areas that you really want to highlight and make stand out, to use that boundary function and really make sort of a selection of items kind of really show that group very visually, the boundary is a really nice way of doing that. So nearly through our MindMeister demo really of functionality, and I've just got a couple more things to show you. So a key reason we want to use mind maps is because they help us to simplify information by just using a couple of keywords here and there. So you see, we're really getting away from text-heavy documents. We're working now with a structure of information that's much easier to manage. But what we can actually do with MindMeister is add a huge amount of extra information to our maps, but still keep this surface level nice and clean. And we don't want to clutter it up. But what we can do is put a whole extra level of information just beneath the surface. We can do that using a couple of things. The first is a really powerful function of linking. So what we can do is pop open this menu again. As I said, this is kind of our go-to place for most things. And I can click this little arrow thing here, and that's going to give me the option of putting in links. So if you imagine you might be working on a project, or maybe your client says to you, we've got a real problem with competitor A. So what we could do is embed in our map a little link to competitor A's website. Now, let's say competitor A is biggerplate.com. What we can do is type in that URL, and if I click that, MindMeister is going to send me straight to that link. Now, if anybody on the call, and I do this myself, has a browser, maybe Chrome or Firefox, where you've got loads of bookmarks that you've never remembered where they were, you've never remembered to go look at them again, think of this like a bookmark, but in your mind map. And the power of that means your bookmark has some context. It's not just one of a big list of bookmarks in your browser. Your link is somewhere in a very specific place in the mind map, so that when you're in that zone, you can just jump off and go straight to that website. So again, you might have linked to competitor A, you might have linked to their service page, you might have linked to their About Us page, and you could keep all of this key information right in the mind map just using a couple of links embedded into each of your topics. So really nice functionality to give yourself little visual signposts. So when you see that little arrow icon, it's telling you you've saved a website, maybe you want to go and have a look. Combined with that is a really great function called notes as well. So back over in this menu, we've got this little menu here, and you'll see a little kind of yellow scratch pad, notepad rather, and this enables us to put a huge amount of extra information in text form beneath the surface. So let's just say I'm doing my competitor analysis in my map, again, just to use that example. What I can do here is actually use this notes area to add lots of extra information about competitor without cluttering the main map. Now, this is very powerful for doing things like I do, which is sometimes I will copy and paste a block of text from a website. I will sometimes copy and paste text from an email maybe that somebody has sent me. So if I'm mapping, if I have a mind map of a particular project and somebody involved in that project sends me an email, and there's maybe just some key text in that message I want to remember, I'll just copy and paste that and pull that across into my MindMeister map for managing that project. And I want to just have all of the key information right at my fingertips. That's really what we're going for here with our mind maps. The final feature we can use is to add attachments to our maps, and you'll see I've got a little paperclip icon here, just like you would with an email. What we can do is actually attach other files to the maps, so again, they're really easily ready to hand. So if I click that, I've added this attachment on already today. So if I click that, it's just going to pop open a PDF that I've saved to the map already as an attachment, and hey presto, it's right there ready for me. I don't have to go hunting around in files and folders trying to remember what I named that, trying to remember where I saved that file. It's right there attached into my mind map, keeping everything nice and clean. So you see, with just those three functions, whilst keeping the surface level of your mind map nice and clear, really easy to move the information. We're not dealing with big blocks of text, but under each of these items, I've linked up a huge amount of extra information using the links, the attachments, and the notes features in MindMeister to ensure I've got all of the information I need right at my fingertips. And what that's going to help me with is if I need to access information quickly, I'm going to have a much better chance of finding it, because I'm going to be able to follow the hierarchy of the maps, the structure of the map, and I'm not going to have to worry so much about hunting around in files, folders, my emails, whatever it might be, because I've pulled key information for my project or for my client, whatever it might be, all into one map using those functions. So that's it really. That's my overview of MindMeister functionality, which I hope is already given you some ideas of how you might use MindMeister. But just to then move over here, we're going to look at some example maps very, very quickly. And then I can see I've got a couple of questions come in, so that's great. If you have any more questions, do throw them in and I'll pick those up in just one moment. So I'm going to power through the example uses nice and quickly. So the key reason I include this is just to show you that MindMeister is really a very universal tool. So whether you're using this in business, education, government, not-for-profit, or at home, it's a very useful tool for all manner of different things. So in a business context, we know that mind mapping is used quite often in early stages of projects. So if I click this link, you'll see we're going to open up a project planning example map, and here you can see somebody's just put together a template, and the principle is the same. So as we start to build out the scope of our project, for example, we might say a new website is included, new marketing brochure may be included. We might then start to link to some documents. We might link to other websites that we want to include in that brochure. So really quickly and easily we can build out our MindMeister project plan. If we want to just make it a little bit more manageable, we can just right-click that central topic and say, just show me the top-level items for now. I maybe don't want to see all of that. Remember what I said earlier, we kind of want to keep hidden the things we're not dealing with right now, just so they're not distracting us. And then we can dive into the sections of the mind map that we want to look at. When I start to add out my resources, I maybe map out some of the issues as we face, and really just build out a nice, simple project plan using MindMeister. Maybe at the end of your project, what you also want to do then is do a little bit of a wash up, a lessons learned, what went wrong, what went well. And again, if I just zoom in a little bit so you can see, we use a really simple template, a Biggerplate. We call it the lessons learned template, which is a positives and negatives, and what are we going to do next time. And when we use this with our clients, it's a very simple sort of checklist almost at the end of a project, but it's a little bit more collaborative, a little bit more exploratory. So client very happy, okay, that's fine, but with what? Very happy with the service levels perhaps, and you could brainstorm with your team and build out your ideas just in this mind map really simply. We also then look at what we would do next time, and we use again very simple templates. What would we do more of, what would you do less of, start doing and stop doing. So simple templates in MindMeister can get you a long way, whether you're working by yourself or working with others. Education-wise, MindMeister is a very popular tool in schools because it's very easy accessible. It's online, which is very popular. And you can see here, I won't open all of these, but this is a mind map, a MindMeister map that somebody has shared on Biggerplate about the theory of evolution. Now, again, you could download this, you can open it from Biggerplate, and you can work with that map, adapt it, and make it your own. Another example here, someone has done a map about reading comprehension. And again, if I wanted to, I could just sign into Biggerplate, hit the download button, and it's then going to take me, if I do this very quickly, it's going to take me to MindMeister where I can then start to work. It's going to open up that mind map in MindMeister so I can start to work with it myself. So loads of example use cases here in the general terms. We know a lot of people are using mind mapping to summarize books. So again, here's a MindMeister map that somebody shared on Biggerplate with their notes or their summary of a particular book. And these kind of maps are very popular. So if you do any book summaries using MindMeister, please do share them on Biggerplate. They will prove popular to other people. And we know a lot of people are using mind mapping also to help them sort of manage their to-do list. So using something like the getting things done technique, here's where somebody's sort of turned that technique into a template that they're then going to be using to manage their personal productivity. So that's pretty much it, and I'm pretty much on time, so that's not bad for me. So I'm just going to pause here round in the conclusion section and hopefully wrap up any questions. So the final sort of next steps is I really encourage you, if you haven't already, to join Biggerplate. As I said earlier, the basic membership is free. That means you're going to be accessing lots of MindMeister maps and also other kinds of maps you could import into MindMeister. It also means you're going to be able to share your own mind maps with our community. Biggerplate is the largest independent community of people who use mind mapping, so it's a great place to show and share what you're doing. You should also consider upgrading to Biggerplate Pro. That's going to enable you to get a lot more out of MindMeister by accessing webinars, tutorials, and even discounts that are going to really enable you to get a lot more from the software. I'm hoping some of you will connect with us after this session, either on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all these normal places. And of course, if you want to message me directly, my email address is there on the screen. It is liam@biggerplate.com. So that, I think, wraps up my presentation. I'm just going to open up the questions panel and see if anybody has got in some questions. Also, any comments, feedback, anything you like, please do just let me know. So let me just see here. So someone says, Susan has got a question here. I'm just trying to understand the question here. Susan says, I got stuck once with that line, engaged it and couldn't get rid of it or stop it. All right, how to turn it off and on again. Susan, I think you're talking about the relationship line that I showed you. So let me replicate that, and then you can tell me in the questions or comments, have I tackled the right issue or have I misunderstood the question? So the issue is, how do I get rid of the relationship line? So as a quick example here, hopefully I can show you this effectively. Sorry, I've got too many panels open here. So let's say I've added a relationship line into my MindMeister map. Remember, I did that up here. I said I want to go from Liam and maybe to Twitter. So I think Susan's problem is, once it was there, how do you get rid of it? So we've got a few options. The main thing is to focus not up here on the pointy bit, but to focus down here on the circle bit. And you'll see if I click on that, I'm then going to start getting a few more options. So a couple of things we can do, just since we're looking at this, we can pull these little things around. So maybe again, if we want to just make the shape of it a little bit better, maybe we need to fit it around some other information or something like that, we can do that. But if I click back in here, I've also got options to change color. I've got options to add label, but I've also, importantly, which I think is your challenge, Susan, got the option to delete that connection. And very easy to delete that. And maybe if I meant for it to be somewhere else, I can just do that. Nice and simple to delete, and then and put it in if it maybe wasn't right the first time, something like that. So I think that's your question, Susan, but please let me know if I've misunderstood or not quite got that right. So that's yes, got that right. Perfect. Great. I've answered that question. That's a benefit. So let me just have a look at other questions. Is a great question. Is there an offline version of MindMeister? Somebody's asked, so can I put MindMeister on my desktop computer and work with MindMeister offline? The answer is no. So MindMeister is a very definitive online tool. The only sort of exception to that is if you're using the mobile apps, actually, because they will sort of store themselves locally and then sync up with your MindMeister account. So if you wanted to put MindMeister on your PC or your Mac laptop, for example, you can't do that. You'd always be working with it in the browser. So you'd always have to open up your internet browser and work with it there. So there's not an offline version of MindMeister that I'm aware of, certainly. But no, they're an online tool primarily. Other questions? Someone's making tea behind me, it seems. Question here, how many people can be in a map at the same time? That is a really great question, and I don't know the answer, actually. So the question is, how many people can be in one MindMeister map simultaneously working on it? It's a really great question. I'll have to find out the answer. The short answer is a lot. I've never come up against it as a problem. So we've had up to, off the top of my head, I know I've had at least 9 people working in a map at the same time. So the technical limits are not the problem. What you maybe need to be more careful of if there are lots of people is actually the sort of the rules of engagement, because even if the MindMeister tool can technically handle 10 people working on a mind map, it can make for a very confusing mapping experience. So what I mean by that is if I'm doing something in a map and suddenly new topics are appearing left, right, and center around me, that can actually be quite confusing if we're trying to do that. So what you have to think about if you're going to try and do mind mapping in a team setting and maybe have people working on a map at the same time is maybe just establishing your kind of rules of the game. How are you doing things? How do you clarify who's doing what? And again, it can be easier if you're doing it on a Skype call and I'll say, okay, I'll update that, or Graham, can you update this? But maybe just have a think about your sort of your rules of the game if you're going to be mapping collaboratively with people. I think that looks like all of the questions at the minute. Oh, there's another question there. Creating templates with clients. Yeah, so I mentioned earlier we do a lot of work at Biggerplate. We're known primarily for our online resources, but somebody's just asked about what I said about creating templates with clients. So if you go to Biggerplate, there's a button here called Services, and that's where you can learn all about the different services we provide. And the consulting one is really what I mentioned earlier. And this is really where we're helping organizations to figure out how to overlay mind mapping on their existing processes. One of the problems we see with people who are providing training or even the software themselves is they almost suggest mind mapping is something new that replaces everything else, and that makes it very hard for individuals or teams to sort of adopt mind mapping because they worry that they're having to throw everything out. So what we do with our clients is we help to sort of map out their existing world, as it says here. We map out all of your existing sort of business activities, and then we're really looking for where mind mapping can add the most value. So somebody earlier mentioned maybe using mind mapping with their client sessions. So we'd work with the client there and say, well, okay, well, tell me about the client sessions. How do they run? What are you trying to achieve? And then we'll map that process into, we'll turn that process into a mind map, which then takes us to template development. And template development is really taking those existing processes and just putting that into a mind map format that's hopefully going to make them feel a little bit more collaborative. It usually makes processes feel a little less overwhelming. And particularly if you are going to use it, for example, with other people and client engagement, it can make it a much more collaborative process where the client can see that you're listening to them, that you're capturing their perspectives, and that you're connecting up these things really well. So we'll work with clients to develop the templates, and then we'll help them to start using them. We'll provide the documentation and the training, whatever's needed, to just make sure it's really easy to integrate the mapping approaches into their working routines. We don't want people to think of this as something additional. You just want to say to them, here's an alternative way of doing the thing you're doing already. So I hope that answers your question about template design and that service. I'm missing an image there, which is strange. But yes, so if anybody's interested in having help mapping out your own processes and thinking about ways to make mapping work in your business, then please do get in touch, and we'll be really delighted to help you. So so that probably, hopefully answers that. Please do message me if you'd like to know more about that. Just so if anyone's worrying, that's not some huge big consulting process. We do this with individual consultants. We've done this with small and medium-sized businesses, and we've also done it with the federal government in the US and big organizations like that. So the consulting service, the process is the same. Map your existing world, figure out where mapping is going to fit best, develop templates and guidance to enable that to happen, and then guide people through the process of starting to adopt these tools. That same 3 steps applies whether you're a company of 1 or a company of 100,000. So yeah, the process is there, and we'd be really happy. It's great fun. We enjoy it, and it almost always is going to help people to adopt and make use of mind mapping a little bit more easily than, for example, looking at generic training or generic templates. So I hope that answers your question, whoever asked that. Sorry, I can't see the name anymore, but please do get in contact if you want to. I think, sorry, that's a bit of a ramble on services, which is not what I'm supposed to be here to do, but I think that answers all of my questions. Oh, I've got a question here about importing. Can I answer this easily? Right, so somebody has asked the question, can MindMeister open other mind map formats? And the answer is yes. The short answer is yes. The long answer is, can Liam remember how to do this quickly? The long answer is probably not. So the way to get other maps, so maybe somebody has created a mind map in a different software and you want to bring that into your MindMeister tool. So what we need to do is come out of our specific maps and come into our MindMeister account, and you'll see there's an option here called import. So if I click that, I'm then going to get the option of browsing, and you'll see here it says it can import MindManager, XMind, and FreeMind. So MindManager, XMind, and FreeMind are some of the most popular sort of mind mapping formats. So MindMeister again has made it really nice and easy for you. Maybe you've got some old maps in those formats, or maybe somebody sent you that format. You can just pull those into MindMeister, and it'll look a little bit different, and you might need to do a bit of formatting, but that's the way to pull other map formats into MindMeister. So I hope that answered your question quickly without going too far down the differences in software. So hopefully that answered that one. I think that might now be the final question. So I'm on time, which is very rare for me. So I always aim to get this finished in 45 minutes because I know people are very busy. But thank you all very, very much for joining me. My email address, as again, is still here on the page. Please don't be shy about reaching out to us. We're here to help you make the most of Biggerplate and make the most of mind mapping. So please do contact me. And in the meantime, I'd like to wish you all very good luck with your mind mapping experiments.